Episode 18, Building and Maintaining Healthy Relationships, with me.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining me on what I know will be another amazing episode. I am your host, Chase Chewning, and this is Ever Forward Radio. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Ever Forward Radio. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of our service members out there, our veterans that are still with us, but specifically those who are not. This is Memorial Day weekend week. I hope you all had a great long holiday weekend. I know we finally got some nice weather here in D.C. today. We're recording on Memorial Day. I actually went over to the monuments in D.C., got to walk around over to the World War II monument, Jefferson Monument, as well as the POW MIA Wall of the Forgotten over at the Vietnam Memorial. So, and by we, I mean me and Boo Thang. This is today's special guest. So a couple weeks ago, well, I guess 1 or 2 weeks ago, I put up a picture on my Instagram to do a Q&A all about relationships. And this is about more or less, I guess, some more insight into my relationship with my wife, May, my marriage, our marriage, and how we kind of got to where we are, the peaks, the valleys, and just some insights on building and maintaining healthy relationships. And so I will let my special guest introduce herself.
Hey guys, I'm May. This is really weird because I'm staring at Chase in the face.
It's a really pretty face.
It took me a while to get used to even doing Q&As on YouTube, so it's even more uncomfortable with the mic in front of me sitting in my kitchen. But I love talking about relationships. I feel like I give pretty good objective advice, I think pretty logically, whereas Chase is more of the emotional one in the relationship. So I'm excited to do this Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here with me, even though you had no choice because we live together. So I'm going to dive into a couple of the questions on the Instagram, but from there, we're probably just going to kind of spin off and talk about, like I said, the ups and the downs and really the insight and our experience, because that's really all we can talk about is our experience and building this relationship. We've been together for right at 4 years now. We've been married for about 8 months. Mm-hmm. And so we got a lot of work to do because we have a whole lifetime ahead of us, and we've done a lot of work to be where we are here today. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to you. I love you. I appreciate you. I appreciate putting up with me and my shortcomings. I think that's a big part of our success is that we're both really committed to each other's shortcomings and the things that, are appealing and attractive on the outside. So we'll get into all that goodness once we get to talking here. So one of the frequent questions that I get just being in a relationship in general, and definitely one of the ones that was the biggest one in the Q&A was, what are your tips on dealing with conflict/arguments in a relationship? And I'll start off just by saying that being with May versus past relationships has really taught me to not bottle things up. When we first started dating, first started hanging out, whatever you want to call it, I was very much sweeping things under the rug. I had a giant lump in my rug of all the things that I was not opening up about. And, not even anything negative, but just opening up about myself, my past, my present, my future, really. Everything I kind of just kept bottled up until I felt I was ready to talk about it or it was pertinent. But that's one thing, one of the many things that May has really helped me on, and that is openness and communication. So I think that's probably step number one. And I shouldn't say avoiding arguments and conflicts because you can't avoid them. They're always going to pop up because you're human. You're two different people. You're going to have differences of opinions and different experiences and insight on things. So I would have to say, I guess to sum up, dealing with conflict and argument in a relationship is to always maintain open, brutal, honest communication, because usually if you're keeping something from the other person or lying to them or even just not conveying how you feel fully, you're usually doing the same thing to yourself. And I know from experience that's definitely what I was doing. And that only snowballs into bigger problems down the road for dealing with your own problems, but definitely in a relationship. So what about, I know you're definitely going to agree with me on that.
Yeah. I think kind of to spin off of that, I think people always say like the foundation of any healthy relationship is trustworthiness. And I agree and I disagree. I think the foundation of every good relationship is communication. Because I think whether everyone goes through things, everyone has things happen in relationships where you trust them more and then you trust them less and then something happens. I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes. However, I think if you're able to communicate through those problems, that's what's going to give you the good foundation.
And that usually, I think, is an automatic go-to answer for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. How specifically would you say that we have gotten better at communication, or like what's our communication type?
So I was actually going to say, so kind of this question a lot of people ask, a lot of my friends have asked me, like, how do you deal with arguments? How do you deal with conflicts? How do you even communicate? And it's kind of backwards, I think, when people ask that, like, how do you deal with conflict? Well, you start by not dealing with conflict. You start by talking, not only having conversations with each other that are only about things that are going wrong, but having conversations about what's going right.
Absolutely, yeah.
So taking time out, once a week, every 2 weeks, we all have things going on, but I think a lot of times people are just, you only talk about serious things when something bad happens. So I think it's important to remind yourself in a relationship, every now and then to have check-ins with each other and to sit down and be like, hey, so I know we talked about this before. This is something that was bothering me. And I've noticed over the last 2 months, you've been doing so much better and I feel so much happier about it, and giving that other person the reassurance that, okay, what we discussed is going well.
Yep, positive reinforcement.
Right, because it doesn't always have to be an argument or a conversation over a conflict. I think that's where people, it's kind of backwards, is basically what I'm saying, is you don't always, every time you're communicating, it doesn't always have to be about something negative. It's really important to also communicate, have check-ins with one another every now and then to let that person know, these are the things that I think you're doing really well at. What can I do better at?
Yeah, or how else are you ever going to know that what you're doing and saying is being received the way that you want it to be by the other person? This is a great example of, honestly, one of the biggest techniques I use in my health coaching practice, is because most of the times people, when they really get serious about going to the gym or watching what they eat, it's because they've had a negative experience. They're like, oh, I'm just a fat, lazy slob, and I've been off my eating game for like a week or a month, or I haven't worked out in forever. And so then what do? You go and like beat yourself up about it. You try to like restrict yourself on everything, eat salads for days. But what you don't do in the interim is give yourself credit, or, go check in with your trainer or your coach in the in-between to say, yes, this is what you're doing right. This is what you're doing that's conducive towards your goals. Mm-hmm. And I think it's exactly the same thing in a relationship. Yeah. You got to have the communication, because then what happens, babe? What you like, every time we talk and it's only about negative things,
then you just feel like everything you're doing is wrong. Like,
and then you
feel
build
like
up walls and you don't talk to each other, because why would I talk to you? Because every time you're just going to yell at me.
You're just going to yell at me every time, right? So that's why I think, just having those check-ins is the most important thing, because it doesn't always have to be a conversation about something negative. And also, to go off of that, like, every time something goes wrong does not mean it has to be an argument. Even calling it an argument, just the word argument, puts a negative connotation on it.
Immediately puts up a wall and gets friction. Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be, sometimes if you're having problems with one another, Chase and I go through things a lot, probably more often than people think, because on social media, you're just going to put up the positive aspects of your life, right? That's what most people do.
Or even when you're around your friends.
Your friends,
public, you always put your best foot forward.
But that's not the case. I mean, we go through the same, if not some struggles that most couples don't go through or haven't gone through yet.
Like this morning, she yelled at me pretty harshly because I folded the towel in a bifold, when I know she's told me it's supposed to be a trifold.
That's not true. That's not true. But, I think just the word argument, it just puts a damper on the whole thing. Whereas you can sit down and just have a conversation, but you have to constantly be reminding yourself, okay, don't raise your voice, don't throw jabs. we're just having a conversation. I'm having a conversation with my partner.
And I think if
this
you
isn't an argument.
Preface it with that first.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to have a conversation with you about A, B, and C.
Yeah, it sets up the conversation in a much more realistic, calm manner, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good job, babe. Nailed it. Number one. Killing it. All right, so next question. Would you say one of you is needier when it comes to attention? I'll go ahead and fall on this sword. It's definitely me. I very, very much treasure and seek out and love attention. And that sounds bad, but I love connecting with my wife. I love being with May. I'm kind of the affection and time love language person, and which any of you, if you're ever about to go into a relationship, or honestly, I think just every person could definitely benefit from.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, from this book, The 5 Love Languages. It's something that May and I both read and was really applicable for us at the time, and it really kind of helped us see the other side, really see what the other person, what they need and how they best receive and are looking for love. Because yeah, you can love the other person, you can really like being in their presence, but there are certain things, whether it's tangible gifts, time, touch, what are some of the other ones? Basically, they're just different ways that people receive and express love. So,
and it's not just for romantic relationships.
Yeah, relationships in general.
Yeah. I think it's geared more so. It's a story about. It's actually written by a psychologist, I think, and he had a client who was going through a divorce or something.
Yeah.
And he wrote the book basically with them in mind, but it's not just geared towards romantic relationships. I mean,
anyone that you spend any amount of time with, your
coworkers,
your parents,
siblings, whatever.
Just learning how other people operate, really, and hey, take note of when you gave your significant other a tangible gift, and they're like, oh, this is nice, this thanks, but then really look at when you're spending time together, just Netflix and chilling on the couch, and they're that much more grateful about that. So I think to answer the question is, I'm definitely, when you look at the brass tacks, needier and look for attention, because I love nothing more than to just be with May, be by her side. I've always been kind of that lovey, touchy, feely, affectionate, physical touch, love language person, and so I usually seek that out and get really super annoying by her because she's like, leave me alone. Sometimes,
really
because that's just how she doesn't receive love the same way.
I'm not the same way. So, and this goes snowballs into a whole nother thing, but we were talking about it the other day, that kind of the person that you develop into as an adult is a result of what happened earlier on in your childhood.
Oh, yeah, your nurture, absolutely.
And so, my family is very loving, and they always open arms, open house policy for literally anyone. And I do the same thing. I mean, as long as Chase has known me, my front door is literally always unlocked for whoever wants to come in.
Friends, animals.
I mean, right now, one of my friends has the keys to my house, and I don't have them, and she's not even here. So, that's always been the policy. But we've never been very physically affectionate, my entire family. Because it's not a religious thing not to be affectionate, but it's
a little more cultural for you.
It's a cultural, because we're very conservative, or my family is.
And for those of you who don't know, May and her whole family, they're Iranian.
We're Iranian, we're Baha'i.
She was born here, but her parents were born in Iran, came over, late teens, early 20s?
Early teens. Yeah. My mom was 15, my dad was 16, but still culturally, the Iranian culture is a very conservative culture. So you're not going to be making out with your husband in front of your parents, or even something as simple as just a quick kiss on the lips. I still to this day feel very uncomfortable doing that in front of my parents. Not that they would shun us or anything, but it's just a different culture. So I feel anyways, going back to it is, I feel because of that, I'm not a very touchy-feely, affectionate type of person, whereas your family is. They're all hugs and love and, holding hands and all of that. So Chase's love language is the affection, and it is that quality time.
I definitely grew up with that a lot more.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like like I said, what happens in your childhood is kind of carried over to your adulthood, whereas mine is a little bit... I feel like my love language is taken the worst. So my love language is, I think it's actually called gift giving. Yeah. Gifts is a love language. And I think it's taken negatively because people automatically think like,
yeah, what do they assume?
You're materialistic,
Yeah.
you know, like you just want, you know, to be showered with presents. And it's not gifts as in presents. It's gifts as in like taking me out to dinner, you know, like
Acts as well as goods.
Acts, yeah, you know, taking me out to dinner, or even like tangible gifts. You know, I get really excited about that kind of stuff because in my head, it's not, oh, Chase bought me like whatever X, Y, and Z designer bag. It's he took note of the fact that I said I have wanted this for so long, and he went and got it. So it's the meaning behind those gifts, you know. So that's my love language. But it was interesting, like in the beginning of our relationship, we were both completely out of it. And we were so opposite. Like in the beginning of our relationship, I used to, you know, I would buy you gifts randomly. Mm-hmm. I would do things like when I was moving out of Richmond and he was staying there, I wanted him to feel like I was still there. And, you know, it was his home. Richmond was his home, even though I was leaving. So I went and like bought all this like stuff to like revamp your apartment. Mm-hmm. And I remember like after I did it, I brought you in. I was like, look at all this stuff I did. And it wasn't that you didn't care, but whereas I would be like over the moon if you had done that, you were just kind of like, oh, cool. Because to you, that's not your love language. But to me, it is. So I don't know, I'm going on a tangent now, but you know, you have to recognize what the other person's love language is. So after we read that book, we both kind of realized we were being selfish. Not that anyone's doing it on purpose.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people do this, you know, because the way you think, you think that everyone else thinks that way too.
And that's how I used to always try to love you, was that I was like, oh, I always love being with you, you know, physical touch, affection, you know, whatever
QT
it may be.
Time,
exactly,
whatever,
But, you know, at the same time, I was like, oh, why isn't she the same way? It's because I was trying to put what I needed and wanted on you, and it wasn't what you were looking for. And, you know, vice versa. Right.
So, in that sense, I guess going back to the question, Chase is more of the
super needy. I'm always
attention seeker, always trying to get my attention. But I mean, I feel like we've been doing better about it. I try to give him more quality time. I try to be more affectionate. But in the same token, like it's not natural for me, you know.
And you have to respect it. You have to respect from where the person is coming, their upbringing, what their perceived norms are. And I think regardless of the love language aspect, just the cultural part for us has been really big. And it's something that actually segues into another question is, you know, what is one of your favorite things that you love about the other culture? And I'm assuming this person was asking about me going into your culture. So the Iranian culture, the Persian culture is something that was, I'm not blind, I'm not dumb. I know other people do things differently in the world. And I have to say, I think a big part of why I was so kind of blasé about it, or just immediately welcoming, was definitely my time in the military. It really taught me, because I traveled the world, I worked right next to and served with a lot of people from a lot of different parts of the world, walks of life, you know, yellow, black, white, brown, I mean, whatever, British, Scottish, German, I mean, insert any person here that you want to talk about, and odds are I've experienced working with them, being by their side. And so that experience really taught me to just take the person as a person and just learn about them. And so, Persian culture, their food is the best thing ever. I don't know how I went my whole life without ever knowing about Persian food. It is probably my favorite cuisine now. And all they do is just feed you, feed you, feed you. So it's great anytime we go home, which is pretty much, we go to her family's house once a week, have family time, dinner, hang out. So the Persian culture, probably, I think to answer the question specifically, I mean, besides their food, that's like an obvious dumb response, but I really, and this kind of goes to what May was talking about, I really love how open and receptive they are as a culture, but it's so interesting to me how you can be so open and receptive but not like physically touching. I mean, when you greet them, you know, you give a hug, you kiss on the cheek, but then like, you know, that's it. I think I've seen your parents kiss like 3 times.
Yeah.
And we've known each other for like 4 years. Yeah, so I guess in summation, to answer the question, what I've enjoyed most about the other culture is just how open and receptive and loving. Like, you can't look at a Persian person or be around them for more than like 30 seconds and not get like high off their existence. They just exude life and living. And like her mom, for example, stone cold sober, first one on the dance floor, last one leaving at our wedding, and it went to like 3:30 in the morning. So they just love life. They love everything about incorporating as many people as possible. Huge family, and just are very welcoming people in general. So I've just really enjoyed being accepted with open arms, more or less. About the first year, I had to always sleep in their basement. But other than that, just a really beautiful culture of people. So the next question, which is another one we get asked a lot, and definitely I think being in the public eye a little bit, we are both seemingly kind of always doing our own thing. So this question is asking, how do you maintain independence while being in a relationship, and especially being married? And so, May and I both do our own thing. We have our own pursuits and interests and stuff, but then we definitely come together for our marriage time. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, baby? What's the reasoning behind that, and how do we do it well? Do we do it well? Maybe you're about to tell me that I suck at it, right?
No, I think we do. I think we struggled with it for a little while, because like we were saying earlier, Chase is very needy.
Yeah, it goes back to my love language. I was definitely always seeking more time out, and you're definitely an independent person.
So I feel like a lot of people in relationships, there's two ways people usually feel about the other person. One, it's I need you. People say that to each other all the time. I need you, right? Mm-hmm. The other one is I want you. And I think that there's a huge difference between the two, and for good reason. So I think that you should never need someone in a relationship, and I feel like I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this one. Ooh. But I do think that you should never need someone in a relationship. You shouldn't need anyone ever other than yourself, right? Whether it's your happiness or your success or your health or whatever it is, mm-hmm. You should be an independent person. You should be happy on your own. You should push for your own success. You should push for your own health, all of that. Being in a relationship should only exemplify all of those things. And if you get to the point where you're in a relationship and you realize, I need this person to be happy, or I need this person to push for my success, or I need this person to keep me healthy, or whatever X, Y, and Z thing that it is, you're in trouble. Yeah. You're in trouble, because it should only exude all of those things. And so that's why I always say this, and I'm a tough lover, and I get a lot of backlash for this, but I always say I don't need anyone, but the people that I have in my life are there because I want them there. And I think that's something that Chase and I kind of battled with, because he is a needy individual in a relationship. Yeah. He kind of got to a point where he was like, I need you. And it ends up becoming stressful for the other person, because you feel like, this is how I feel. I don't know how other people feel, but it can turn into an obligation. It can turn into an obligation. It can turn into too much weight on one person's shoulder, because you feel like they can't exist without you. So I think it's really important. And we had this quote, I don't remember, it's a really long quote, but we had someone recite it at our wedding because I love it so much. And it's talking about how in a relationship, there's two different entities, and you come together as one unified force, but you don't turn into one person. Yes. And I think that that's a common misconception with a lot of people, especially when they get married. People are like, oh, two people are becoming one. Absolutely not. Two people are still two people, but now they're on the same team. And so I think that's the difference. You should still have your independence. You should still have your own wants and your own drives. And the other person should support you and motivate you and push for all those things that you want, and vice versa. And, if you both want the same things, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Chase likes to work out, so do I. Chase is a driven person, so am I. But we still have our own specific interests. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to do, push a little bit more social media presence. This is definitely a direction, where my career and interests and, hobbies have all kind of lined up. So, yeah, there are times where, I'm like, hey, babe, love you, but get out of the room. I got to record. I got to film. Of course, I'm not rude like that. I've never talked to my wife like that. But I definitely think what she's saying is spot on. The second that you try to force and become one person, you can't become one person without losing part of yourself.
You lose your own identity.
Exactly. And that only comes back in a negative light down the road. And I personally can say, in some of my past relationships, romantic, friendships, really, no matter what, if you're working with another person, being with another person, resentment is a festering wound. And you may think you're fine with it in the beginning, but it will come out later in a much worse time, place, and it's just not conducive at all. So
yeah. And I think kind of spinning off of that too is going into a relationship knowing exactly what you want. Not just in that relationship, of course, in that relationship, but what you want out of your life.
Yeah,
right?
outside of that relationship.
Outside of the relationship, what do you want? What do you accomplish? Know that going in. Make sure that that person knows that going in, and don't let it alter.
Mm-hmm. And they have to accept it. They have to accept it.
And if they're not going to accept it, well, you laid it on the table from the beginning. And if they can't accept it, or there's something that they don't agree with, then you have to wash your hands clean of that, because you might be okay with it for the first 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, because you're still in that honeymoon phase. Mm-hmm. But 15 years down the line, when you realize that there was this thing, whatever it may be, that you always wanted to accomplish and you didn't because you were just blinded by love, really,
and even
it'll come back.
Even if it was for good reasons. If you sacrifice something like a job opportunity or moving or pursuing a different passion because it wasn't conducive for the other person or your relationship at the time, odds are that desire, that want, that interest isn't going to go anywhere. Sometimes it does, sure, I guess, but then what happens again? It's just resentment that pops up, and then you just begin to have arguments and disagreements about things that aren't really about the things you're talking about.
It's about that resentment.
Exactly.
It's just coming out another
over
way.
Their head, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I guess to kind of cap it off, her and I both have had a lot of brutal honesty with each other about who we are individually, what we want to give up, what we're willing to compromise on in order to always have the other person's back and promote their growth, while at the same time not sacrificing our own. Okay. Yeah. Team Chewning. Okay, what about, here's a fun one. What's your favorite memory of a relationship? First date and wedding are excluded.
The first thing that comes to mind, honestly, I'll be real, I don't know what our first date was.
Do we even have a real first date?
I don't think so.
Long story short, pretty much ever since May and I met, we've been dating.
Yeah.
We met.
I'm not really
left.
the go on a date type of person.
Yeah.
I kind of like to start my relationships off as friendships, Yep. Even any past relationships or whatever it was with different people in the past, I'm still to this day, we might not talk every day, but if I see them, I'm not the type that's screw him, I'm still on good terms with pretty much everyone, because I always start my relationships as a friendship first.
Wait, you talked to other guys before me?
Anyways, so I honestly don't remember our first date at all. The first memory that comes to mind, though, is Chase and I went zip lining, and it was the most traumatizing date or whatever it was I have ever
PTSD from zip
been on. Because it wasn't just you walk up this ladder and you zip line. That's what I thought it was, and I'm totally fine with that. But it was an obstacle course.
High ropes obstacle course. And there was different levels. And of course, Chase is in shape, and he's 2 feet taller than me. So he wanted to do the highest level one. And I was like, oh, I can do it, because I had no idea what I was getting into. Turns out when you're 5'2", going on the black course is not the best idea. So my arms couldn't reach ropes. So I stopped at the top of the ropes, and I just started crying because I didn't know what to do. And I was traumatized. Bear hugged a tree and I had to pry you off.
And there was only 2 zip lines for the entire thing. So, note to self, if you're ever going to go ziplining, make sure it's just a zip line versus a zip line course, a obstacle course. Yeah.
She was a sport about it, though. She put on a brave face until
the very end.
That brave face melted off, and
I just started crying.
Put her on one zip line down to the lower level one, and then I think you got off the course, and that was it. Yeah. So I'll recycle one. So maybe people that are listening here that haven't seen this in one of our YouTube Q&As, one of the best overall just memories in general I had included May. It was you, me, your roommate at the time, and two of my really good friends, Tom, Pat. They were actually my wedding, my groomsmen. We all went to this place right at the base of Wintergreen Mountain. It's this like ski resort, but it was during the fall, and they're having like this big fall festival at this big lodge, Devil's Backbone Brewery, and like this huge restaurant. They had this huge outdoor field all set up with like tents and music, and it was probably one of the most gorgeous days. And like the scenery alone was just amazing. You're in the mountains, you're at the base of the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains, this beautiful ski resort, and we were just like having a really good time. It was probably one of the first times that your friends, my friends, and us had all kind of like gotten together. So like it was great in the sense that our groups were merging, and we're getting along. You're like, yes, her friends like my friends like her friends. It's gonna be great. And that was actually the first day that I told you that I loved you.
Ew.
Yeah, gross. Super. See, we'll go all the way back to my love language, just attention and affection. I'm a big emotional sap, but I mean, it was just a beautiful day, great friends, great weather, and I mean, yeah, I'll never forget that first time. Okay, Chase, did you have any doubts or fears when proposing? No, not even one. When they say when you know, and I knew, and I know. It was pretty intense. I did it on Persian New Year. It's called Nowruz. It's their big holiday, kind of like their Christmas, and it was in front of her whole family, and so I didn't have any fears about the question of proposing, but I don't know, just something about, I didn't want to like take away from your holiday or something. So
it was actually perfect though. I never thought that I would want someone or you to propose in front of my whole family, but I'm really happy that you did, because it made it really special. I feel like people don't usually do that. It's usually like they're by themselves, and then you're like, yay, congrats to us, and then you just walk away. But it was cool because my whole family was there. Yeah. My sister was screaming and crying. My brother was making fun of my sister. My dad was just like, what is going on? So it was a really cool situation. How do you cope with living together while maintaining me time / personal space? Is that even possible?
Oh, yeah, so kind of piggybacking off one of the last questions. So that question was more about having your independence. This is more about having your own personal time. Which I think is very possible. And how do you do it while living together? So it's hard. May just locks me out. I can take a hint. It's hard, but like you're right. It does piggyback off the other question, because we both do our own stuff throughout the day. We have a lot of the same interests, but I feel like we take the time to do things apart, whereas we used to not. We used to be together all the time. Okay, relax. Which was fun, but you need to miss the other person. You don't want them to turn into your roommate. Yeah. Because there's a fine line between having like a romantic relationship and having a roommate. Like a living arrangement. Yeah, exactly. So it's really important to do that. So, just examples of ways that you can do it. If you're going to go to the gym, I mean, Chase and I, now we go to different gyms, but before when we were going to the same one, we would go to the gym at the same time, but we wouldn't do the same workouts. Yeah. Every now and then we would, if there was only one squat rack and we were both happening to do squats that day. Yeah. But usually it's like, all right, we get to the gym, we both go do our own thing for an hour and a half, and then we'll leave together or something like that, so that you get your own space, because it's also really important. And then also giving each other that time, allowing the other person to, for me, go hang out with my girlfriends without Chase there, and for Chase to go hang out with his friends without me there, because we're all best friends with each other, my girlfriends and Chase's friends. And well, that implies that I actually have friends. You do have friends. So, but it's important to allow each other to go and do that, because, I mean, as much as you love that person, sometimes you just need a break, or you need to talk to your friends about what's going on. And you can't do that if the other person's there, so you kind of have to consciously think about it. Yeah. I think. Yeah, I guess it's different from what we were talking about before of, maintaining independence. Whereas this one is, honestly, it's so many other of my friends, I'm sure your friends do the same thing. Like, what do you mean you're doing this without your husband? What do you mean you're doing this without
people
me?
get so blown. Like, they're like, where's Chase? I'm like, I don't know, doing his own thing. And they're like,
you don't have to be attached to the hip. It's, again, going back to our very first question about communication, we may not be doing something together, but you know where I am at all times. It's always just about, honestly, you can't go wrong, I think, to an extent, know your partner, know your friend, whatever. You can't go wrong with too much communication. Just queuing it up as like, hey, after work, some coworkers of mine, we want to go, like, I'm going to stop by and we're going to grab dinner, or I'm going to run an errand or whatever. Just knowing where the other person is and what they're doing, A, not in the sense just to keep tabs, but B, just that tells the other person that you're thinking about them enough to, like, clue them in as to where you are, what you're doing, and with whom. And again, it's not about, hey, tell me where you are with which friend and, when you're going to be home. You don't need to keep tabs.
It's not a control thing.
Exactly, yeah. It's just like, okay, that's cool, great. Also for me, it's always a big, like, safety, security thing. Yeah. Like, I have OPSEC at all times, and it goes back, I think, to my military training. Just
I actually was laughing,
keeping tabs on your people at all times.
I just saw this now on your Twitter from, I guess, Friday night. You tweeted and you were like, if anyone knows where my wife is, please let me know.
Yeah, she was like, oh yeah, I'm going out meet some friends after work. We're going to go to this jazz festival in DC. And I was like, okay, cool. And then it was like 5 hours later, and I was like, okay. Coming to find out, then we went to dinner, and then then I was on the phone with my mom, and I was like, all right, I'll just sit here on the couch and just stare out the window, wait for you. Like, kidding, I wasn't doing that, not for very long, but just the open communication thing. And again, it's not about controlling the other person or having the upper hand. It's just a mutual respect thing. Because I think, especially when you get to the marriage aspect, you have to always have the other person's respect in line, because you're not just representing yourself, you're representing your husband, your boyfriend, your fiance, whatever. Again, to a certain extent, but I really think, when someone looks at me, they should see both of us. When they look at you, they should see a reflection of us. Yeah.
But not as an extension of one another.
Exactly.
Like, it's not like, oh, May and her husband are here. Yeah. It's like May and Chase are here.
Yeah.
And even, like, when we go out together, we'll go out to the club or the bar or whatever together, and we generally don't hang out with each other the whole time. Like, just
like at the gym, we start together and end together.
We start together and we end together, but in the middle, we hang out with our friends, because otherwise, like, I don't really understand couples that just go out together and are just together the whole time. Yeah. Every now and then, of course, but if you're going out for the sake of, spending time with other people, because it's also important to let your friends know, like, hey, just because I have a boyfriend or a husband or a girlfriend or whatever, doesn't mean that our friendship is lessened anymore. So it's also really important to both of us. When we go out, we spend time with our friends. In the middle, we'll come back, we'll dance together, we'll be cute, we'll be husband and wife, and then it's like, all right, I'll see you again in another 30 minutes.
Yeah, again, so I think to kind of just summarize everything, we've gotten some really good questions. We've talked about answering them, and we've got some really good spin-offs. I think it really comes down to, again, not just in a romantic relationship, but your coworker, your friendship, your parents, your kids, whatever you're dealing with, is recognizing from where that other person is coming. Know their, I'm going to say love language, but it doesn't have to be about love. Basically just know how they best operate. Take note, have some kind of sense of awareness of when they respond well to things and when they kind of coil back, or when they're super receptive about something that maybe isn't that tight to you. But it's just, you have to meet the other person where they are and hope that, that they'll do the same thing. And if they don't, then, that may not be the relationship for you. That may be a sign that you're investing more than you should be, or at least cause a conversation. Hey, I've been doing this. Is this conducive to what you need and want? Are we on the same page? Like May was saying, just having these semi-regular check-ins when things are going well is just as important as when they're not. Whether you're going to have a knockdown, drag-out argument in the middle of the night, or it's literally just, hey, maybe she has been asking me to, like, contribute more around the house or pick up something that she can't get to, and I do, and then she acknowledges that. So it's not like I'm feeling like I'm doing something for nothing. So knowing where the other person is, know how they best receive love and how they need to best operate in a relationship, frequent communication. Again, you don't need to beat a dead horse, but just knowing that this other person is coming to you on a somewhat regular basis to talk about things goes a long way. Respecting them, maintain your independence while always having the other person's back and helping them move forward as well as yourself. Mm-hmm. So, which kind of segues into what I thought would be a good last question for you is, you all know my story and background with Everforward Radio, everything that it does to my life, for my life, and how I've been affected by and molded by it. May has really been a part of this phase of it for sure. The last 3-4 years, it's really kind of come into a focal point for me. You know, I've really put my passion to a purpose with all this. So, I mean, you know my background, baby, with Everforward. You know, what does it mean to you, and you know, how does it maybe apply to you and our relationship? You know, how do you live a life Everforward?
Mm-hmm. I feel like I always kind of had, I just never had words to put to it. Mm-hmm. So I think once, you know, I met you and everything that you and Max have been doing, and, you know, everything that your family lives by, it's just put words to actions that I've always believed in. And that's just to kind of keep pushing. I think a lot of times, I'm a huge proponent of people not feeling sorry for themselves. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when people just sit there and feel sorry for themselves and pity themselves and why me, poor me. And again, that just goes back to me being a tough lover. But, you know, I think that's a huge part of what Everforward means to me, is like, just get up and keep going. You know, life keeps on going. It's not going to stop. So how are you going to react to that? Mm-hmm. Right? So I think that's the biggest thing for me, is to just keep pushing through. And I've had plenty of obstacles throughout my life where I could have just stopped and given up. And I have, in many instances, given up on things for a short period of time. And then I would come back and I'd be like, nope, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Get off your butt, work a little bit harder. And then if things still don't go right, at least you put in the effort and at least you worked as hard as you possibly could have.
You left it all out there.
You left it all out there, and maybe it's just not meant to be, but at least you gave it all that you did.
Yeah.
But just keep pushing. So I think that's what it means for me.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Miss Thang for being on the podcast today. This actually has been requested for a long time. Her and I, we do some videos together every once in a while. She shows up on my YouTube channel and Instagram, but I think because I feel she's very articulate and driven, especially when it comes to relationships. She has a very keen, objective mind to a lot of things, and a lot of times it's caught me off guard, and I haven't liked it at first, but then I think about it, I'm like, damn it, she's right. She's like third-party view looking in, so her insight has really been appreciated in our relationship, and a lot of just my own individual personal goals too. So
thanks for having me.
Yeah. If you guys like this, let me know. Leave a comment. I'll leave all of May's information in the show notes if you want to check out her IG game, her Instagram. She's growing over there. She's got a really good photographer, if I do say so myself. So thank you again for joining me, and that's going to be this week's episode of Everforward Radio.